Hello and welcome to a brand new hardware review. Today with something a bit different. Not a mouse, not a keyboard, not a headset, but a racing wheel. Namely, this one, or the one you're going to see behind me. This is the Trust GXT 288. A racing wheel that's, well, it's about an entry-level-ish racing wheel given to me by the people at Trust to review and to keep. So again, expect some better coverage of racing games in the future because we're gonna have a dedicated peripheral to use those games with. So you've seen the unboxing, so you probably know exactly how big this thing is, so that's why I can't actually fit into the frame because, well, there's also the pedals, so again I can't keep it up during the whole review because it weighs even more than the Have It keyboard from last time. So let's get right down to it. What can this thing do? Well, for starters, it can be used to pilot vehicles in a video game. That's the basic concept of a racing wheel. Why would you need a racing wheel and not just a keyboard? Well, you can't really use a keyboard properly with most racing games because you don't have granular control over the acceleration or even to steering. You just have to mash those keys hoping that you may just find the right amount of steering to get around the corner at a complicated racing track like the Nürburgring or whatever that thing is pronounced like. That's why you need a steering wheel. Or you may also opt for a gamepad because it has progressive triggers for the braking and acceleration and these mini joysticks that will help with steering. But you really need a racing wheel if you want to do any actual proper driving in a video game because there's nothing like actually having the analog interface or digital to analog interface of the real thing in front of you. And is this good enough for that? Well, first let's get to the more visible part of it. This thing is made out of plastic and a rubberish material that makes it very pleasant to, well, not excessively pleasant to grip, but you're not going to be in trouble of sliding your hands off it in the, I don't know, rainy, slick nights of racing on Le Mans, because again, you're probably not going to play in the rain. That would be a level of realism that this steering wheel isn't built for, and also probably your living room isn't built for rain either. If it is, then you must have a really interesting setup. Or your water cooler just sprang a leak and your CPU is fried. The material isn't what you would call high-end, but it's not the cheapest thing possible. It is sturdy from what I've been able to, well, test it. I haven't actually tried to smash it over with my head repeatedly like I do with the keyboard sometimes when I fail something at a game, but it is sturdy enough. And one very important thing to note is that during the unboxing, I said that maybe the gripping mechanism, the mechanism that lets you clamp this onto the desk, may not be good enough because it doesn't have any rubber inserts. Well, it doesn't have rubber inserts, but I have had no issues with it standing still. It is just bolted down here, and I'll probably just shake my monitors off the desk before this thing comes off. So yeah, that's absolutely not a problem. What is the problem, however, is the way that the pedals stick to the floor. You can't see them in my hands because they're on the floor, and there's a big cable running through them and I can't pick them up, but you'll see them on the background. The thing is that they don't stick on the floor. They have some rubber feet to them, very small rubber feet, and it's the kind of rubber that will attract dust in 1 second, and cleaning them will probably take some time. And basically, if you have carpet, I mean like carpet everywhere, you're safe. It even has a little bit of a clamp that lets you lower it and just grip onto that carpet and it will be safe. It will stand still no matter how much pressure you put on it. But if you have, I don't know, a small rug that you keep under your desk, or worse, you have wooden floors, yeah, you're gonna have to keep one foot constantly slammed into the plastic to keep it still because it will just run all over the place. I would have preferred if it had some suction cups or the option to bolt it down somehow, but it doesn't, and that's, well, the main issue I've had with it in racing games is that the pedals would constantly run around. I don't have carpet, and again, this is made for carpet or something that is very non-slick, I don't know, if you have gravel in your living room, yeah, if you have tarmac in your living room, yeah, this is probably gonna be a good place to set down the pedals. Otherwise, they tend to slide around a lot. Again, use carpets if you want to clamp this thing down. Or you could probably drill some holes into it by yourself and just clamp it down, because it's basically a giant piece of plastic, probably bigger than it should be, at least in the base, but again, that's so you can keep your foot on it so it won't slide away. Could probably have used a foot-like shape in it to get it to stand there even better, like for the heel at least. Sort of pedal, not a pedal, but an imprint or something. A footrest. But enough for now about the pedals. Let's get back to the actual steering wheel itself. It is, well, it's quite nice to look at. I would have honestly preferred if it was a tiny bit bigger. I don't know, maybe it's because I have gigantic hands or something, but it sort of feels a bit smaller than the ones on the cars that I have driven. Actually, I haven't driven a lot of cars, but they tend to have kind of bigger-ish steering wheels. But you know, this is more of a racing wheel, and racing cars do sometimes have a lot smaller racing wheels because they tend to have buttons on them which you may need to actually press, and well, yeah, this thing does too. It has a lot of buttons on it. Buttons that are, for the most part, the same ones you would find on a game controller, because this one actually tends to behave like a gamepad if it's set in X input, and as a steering wheel if it's set in direct input, but I'll get to that in a moment. You have buttons like triggers. You have a mini joystick that lets you change the not the FOV, but it's mostly used for changing the camera around. You find it in a lot of it's a POV, an analog POV. You also have the D-pad for standard POV. You have the X, A, X, Y, B buttons like standard. You have L3 and R3 that are, well, they're set as separate buttons because you don't have actual thumbsticks that you can click on. And on the back you have, well, they're not exactly flappy paddles for changing gears, but they are buttons that are bolted into the back of the steering wheel. And they're quite easy to access, but if you don't like them, you can always use the gear shift, because these buttons on the back are tied directly into the gear shift, and they are basically the exact same button. One thing to note, you may notice that there's a sort of button-like surface on the top of the steering wheel, the gear shift. That's not an actual button. I would have honestly preferred it if it was a button. I don't know, I could have used it for NOS or something, or something, I don't know, a clutch maybe. There's no clutch pedal, by the way, if I haven't mentioned it already. There's just brake and acceleration, but again, I'll get into details about that thing soon. So yeah, in terms of build quality, oh yeah, there's the home button, the start and select, because again, it is a gamepad-ish type of scenario we have here. In terms of build quality, for the price it has, yeah, I'd say it's about as good as they could make it. It doesn't have any metal bits. It doesn't really have any fine texture to the plastics. It's just a rubberized-ish plastic feel to it, with some, well, not perforations, but they do have some holes on the sides, you know, to prevent any slicks that may happen when your hands are sweaty. But again, that's not something that happened to me up until now, so that probably won't happen to you either. Now, in terms of performance, this steering wheel has a rating, well, it says that it has a turning rate of about 270 degrees. That means it has about 135 in one direction and 135 in the other direction. And it does have a quite, well, for an entry-level racing wheel, it does have a quite large turning radius. The actual racing wheels, the higher end ones that cost more than this monitor and this wheel and the screen and my microphone and probably some of my organs, those things tend to have a rotation angle of about 1080 or at least over 720. Those are made more to be compatible with simulators, and this, well, this isn't necessarily what you would use with a simulator. Also, not only because that it has only that 270 degrees turning angle, but also because out of those 270 degrees, you don't actually use them all. For example, there's a bit of a dead zone in this area. There's about, I would say 4, maybe 6 degrees. That's actually quite acceptable. 6 degrees or 4 degrees of dead zone is nothing to nothing actually noticeable. It's just there because sometimes it needs to be there. You can also tweak, if you want more dead zone, you can tweak that in the software in the games actually, because it doesn't have its own software. But the thing is that no matter what sensitivity you set it to, because it does have a sensitivity button, one that lets you make it more sensitive or less sensitive, even on the lowest sensitivity, it will just stop registering. It will peak. It will stop registering more input at about, well, I would say 95-ish degrees on each of the directions. So you've got about actually 190 degrees, 180 to 190 degrees of actual turning. That's on the lowest setting of sensitivity. On the highest one, you probably have less than 180, which is that's not actually good. That's kind of really in the low end category of racing wheels. And that problem sort of is visible both in direct input mode, when it only has 256 units of sensitivity, and also in X input, where it has about 65,000 of them, which is it's a lot. Again, it's made to emulate a gamepad when you need to, for games that don't have compatibility with direct input game controllers. Which you may think to yourself, well, why wouldn't a racing game have compatibility with a direct input steering wheel? Well, maybe because it's made by Microsoft and it's called Forza. You would be surprised how many racing games actually ship with improper wheel support and improper direct input wheel support as standard. It's kind of annoying. Had problems with the crew getting to register this both in X input and direct input mode. You can switch it with a little button on the back of the gear shift. It usually works in most games. It worked well in Grid Autosport, it worked well in Dirt, it worked well even in what I would call one of the best simulator games ever made, is Richard Burns Rally. It's a great game, and well, it's also one of the games that sort of highlights that this maybe isn't exactly the best kind of steering wheel to use for a simulator. There's a lot of, well, sensitivity issues with it, and well, how shall I put this? The pedals sort of have the same problem that the steering wheel does, namely that registering the input doesn't go all the way it should. And the problem is a bit more evident on the pedals. Because well, while acceleration is kind of okay, I mean, it does have a bit of a dead zone, but you can press it all the way down, there's no problem. The brake does have a considerable dead zone at the beginning, and it also has resistance. The pedals can't be adjusted. The resistance they have on default, that's the one they will always have, unless you, I don't know, go into them with a hammer and try to change the coils yourself, the resistance yourself, by manually mashing them with a hammer. That would be a solution, to change the springs or something. But the default setting, you probably will have problems with the braking. You will not know exactly when you start to brake because of the dead zone. There's not much of an input in there, not much feedback to when you actually start braking, and the braking isn't necessarily linear. Both pedals actually have this problem. They're linear to about, I would guess, almost a half of the motion to press them down, but the other half of the sensitivity of the detection actually goes to about, so maybe a third, or at least a third or a quarter of what's left of the motion downwards. So you're gonna top off both the acceleration and the braking long before you actually get the pedal to the metal, and that's a bit annoying. I mean, the best way to describe it would be, imagine if a steering wheel or if pedals had the pedals have a mouse acceleration. You move them, and up to a point it moves okay. You move them a bit more, and bam, they go all the way to the end. That is honestly a bit of a problem. It sort of detracts from the actual linear control you would have with something like this, because this actually gives me better control when accelerating and braking than the pedals do. They're just more linear. They don't have the same problem. And it's not a thing that's limited to games. It's not a setting that I forgot in some of the games. It's something that does in Windows. You actually see the graph, the charts, the input that goes all boom, man, to the max when you get about about past the halfway point. It's something that makes me not recommend this the steering wheel for anything but arcade games, for games that don't require a lot of precision. And as I've said, that thing happens in both the direct input mode, where it is recognized as a steering wheel, and in X input mode, where it emulates a gamepad. The part with it emulating a gamepad is a bit worse, because these buttons on the top, yeah, these things are supposed to be progressive triggers, but they're not. So these things are supposed to have the exact same function as this. That's how they're wired. But they do not work like that at all. These are just buttons. They're clicky buttons. They will just max the axis once you press them in any way, shape, or form. They're not gonna be all that great as substitutes for the pedals, so yeah, you're gonna get stuck with the way the pedals work. Also, because these are hardware coded as being triggers, you probably won't be able to use this steering wheel as a gamepad substitute just about everywhere, because it won't work like that at all. It's a limitation that's a bit annoying. And for something that costs almost, well, it's between $80 and $90, yeah, I would have expected these to be actual working triggers. Because the pedals don't take up that function when you switch to X input. As I've said, there were some issues with this wheel being detected by games like The Crew. Though to be fair, The Crew tends to be kind of a crappy game a lot of the time, even though it had 2 expansions and they made it free once. It's still got a lot of issues, quite a lot of issues. I have tested in other games, like I said, in Rich and Burns Rally and Grid Autosport and Dirt 3. I believe I also tested a bit in Rocket League, though I'm not a fan of playing Rocket League with anything but a mouse and keyboard. And sadly, I wasn't able to test it properly in my favorite racing game, in Need for Speed 5 Porsche, because, well, remember how I said that the game worked flawlessly on Windows 10 for me? Well, it did back then. Now it sort of recognizes even the headphones, USB headphones, as an input device, and constantly crashes. I did manage to get to play it a bit with the wheel, but it wouldn't recognize the axis for acceleration and braking, and my car would just spin in a circle. It wasn't all that fun, and well, I haven't been able to get it to work properly since. But as I've played with it in Grid Autosport, with settings not necessarily turned down to the highest possible simulation, because in the highest possible form of simulation, the game is kind of hard to play with this. I would have actually, in some cases, been better off with the keyboard, because, well, there's no dead zone with braking or acceleration on the keyboard. You just press down and it brakes. Here, like I've said, the pedals do have a dead zone and they do have some resistance. The braking pedal has enough resistance to make you not know for sure if you're braking or not. And that's very unpleasant. Also, because it has resistance, when you brake, it'll just slide off into the blue yonder unless you have carpet installed on the floor where you put the pedals. Very important. Again, if you're gonna get this, have something to stick. You know, I could have probably bolted it down or stuck it with some tape, but I do have a small rug under the disc, and yeah, it just slid all over. It even pushed away my my subwoofer, but that's not really that important. But in terms of actual performance for more arcade games like Need for Speed, like the later Need for Speed games, yeah, it works. It's actually quite fine. Again, for arcade, if you don't want the best precision necessary to play a simulator, for games that don't require you to actually know how to properly drive a car or how to take a corner like, you know, you would in real life, this thing works out well. It gives you a sort of sense of immersion. Up to a point. Again, this is sold as having force feedback in it, and it's true. In a certain sense, it is true. But force feedback means two very different things when going from a gamepad to a steering wheel. In a gamepad, force feedback is vibration, that's it, it's a rumble pack. There's nothing else you could do. Well, there is haptic feedback, but that's haptic feedback, not force feedback. Force feedback in a steering wheel means something else. It means that there's a motor inside it that will fight against you, that will pull the steering wheel to another direction, that will try to simulate all the internal workings of the drivetrain, of the direction of a real car. This one just has the standard vibration feedback. It sort of only works in X input mode because it's basically trying to emulate the rumble pack from a X input controller like the Xbox 360 controller. So it may have issues working with older games that relied on direct input and recognize the steering wheel. But you know what you could use it for? If you don't necessarily like racing games all that much, but you just want to drive, well, apart from the dozens of games that are just about driving, like Euro Truck Simulator, or yeah, it will probably work very well with something like Euro Truck Simulator because that's not a very fast game. You don't have to necessarily have complete control over your throttle during the apex of a turn. Yeah, that would work well with this steering wheel. Also for GTA 5, because it's an X input standard, you could set this up to just use it to drive cars in GTA 5. You could also use it to drive your characters around, but it probably won't be as fun of an experience because, you know, it's kind of hard to pilot a human being like you would a car. Haven't tried playing MechWarrior on it, but probably wouldn't be that good of an experience because aiming with this would probably not be that easy, though I may try it on a live stream once along with StarCraft 2 and Dark Souls. I may try to play those with the steering wheel. It won't necessarily be a very fun experience for me, but hey, you know, maybe we'll get some interesting experiences for the people watching this. So, would I recommend this? Well, if for an amateur, like if you've never had one and you just want a steering wheel so you'll have a little sense of immersion, then yeah, I would say go for it. It costs somewhere between $80 and $90 depending on where you get it from. It may seem a bit high. I mean, this thing costs, well, I actually forgot how much this thing costs even. What was it, like 40-30 bucks? But it does give you a more of a sense of immersion because it is an actual steering wheel that you can move, that you can pretend to be in there, in the car, in the cockpit. It's a different kind of feel than you would have than by just using a gamepad. Also, I would recommend you get this if you have a child or a nephew or some kid that wants to play racing games, but you just know you're probably not gonna spend the $500 it would take to buy an actual proper racing wheel. One that maybe has the option to move the shifter somewhere else, because although it's very easy to handle here, like it's within arm's reach, it's not necessarily the place you would find a gear shifter on a car. It would be more, I don't know, to the side, so making this detachable in a future version would probably be a good idea. I mean, it's not like it would be impossible. The pedals themselves are also detached and they're connected with a data cable, so it wouldn't be impossible. But getting back to the idea, get this for someone that's just starting out. They just want to see what it feels like before they go all in and buy something that costs more than my PC. Or for a kid that, you know, breaking this would probably not ruin the budget or something. Yeah, it's an okay-ish steering wheel, racing wheel for the entry level. And I mean the entry level to the entry level. It's higher than the lowest level possible. You do have a lot of low-end steering wheels that offer even less options than these. They don't have pedals, they don't have a gear shift, they don't have a lot of things. This one has them all. Like, it is the full package, but it is a very basic version of the full package. It won't necessarily give you total accuracy or a lot of features, you know, like a gear shift that's not sequential, a manual one. You don't have that. It's just a sequential gear shift and an emulation, well, combination of these buttons on the side. It is okay. It's the best way I can describe it. It's a low-end entry level, steering wheel, racing wheel, that, well, it's better than just having a gamepad or just a keyboard. Though again, it does have some downsides that are kind of annoying and will probably prevent you from enjoying actual games that try to simulate driving a car. But you know, for arcade games, yeah, it's okay. Well, that'll be it for this edition of the hardware review. I will come back next time with the other Have It keyboard, and then I'll have a mouse review, and then possibly a video card review. The video card was actually supposed to arrive today, but it's been delayed for reasons unknown. They didn't give you a tracking number, and oh, I hope it doesn't arrive here exploded or something. Well, that'll be it. See you soon again with another hardware review. Goodbye. Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.